Meet Andre Lee Thomas, a name that has become synonymous with one of the most horrifying crimes imaginable. In 2004, Thomas murdered his estranged wife, Laura Boren, along with his 4-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter in Sherman, Texas. But this crime was more than just a murder. It was a shocking display of depravity and violence that is difficult to comprehend. Not only did Thomas cut open the chests of his victims and remove the hearts of the 2 young children, but he also removed both of his own eyeballs in 2 separate incidents and consumed one of them. The details of this crime are disturbing and a stark reminder of the evil that can exist in this world. I thought this case was straightforward, but by the end, I questioned myself whether Thomas was a victim of a failed society. The life of Andre Lee Thomas was fraught with challenges from the beginning. He was born in Muskogee County, Oklahoma, in 1983 to Rochelle. An alcoholic who suffered from depression and sexual abuse. Rochelle raised Andre and his 5 brothers, mostly by herself in Sherman, Texas, a place that lacked basic amenities like running water, heat, and electricity. To make matters worse, other members of the Thomas family had problems with substance abuse and violence. When Andre was just a young boy, his uncle was fatally shot by his relative. Despite the challenges he faced, Thomas initially seemed to do well. He attended a Baptist church, excelled in the gifted and talented program at school, and enjoyed sketching futuristic cars and tinkering with old ones. However, at around 10 years old, his behavior began to change. He claimed to hear angels and demons arguing in his head, and even believed himself to be a fictional character from a video game. He turned to drug and alcohol to try and quiet the voices he was hearing. By the time he was 13, Thomas had made 2 suicide attempts and had a series of arrests for various crimes, including stealing a car. Despite his obvious mental health issues and suicide attempts, he did not receive adequate ongoing support and treatment. These tragic circumstances highlight the critical importance of providing mental health resources to those who need it. Thomas was once in a loving relationship with a woman named Laura Boren, who he had been dating for several years. His life took a dramatic turn when he became a father at a very young age. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade to support his family and worked multiple jobs to provide for them. Despite these challenges, Thomas and Laura got married on his 18th birthday in 2001. Unfortunately, their marriage was short-lived and they separated just 4 months later. Andre's mental state deteriorated rapidly after their separation. He struggled with delusions, suicidal thoughts, and had difficulty holding down a job. He became fixated on apocalyptic ideas from the book of Revelation and began to believe that his ex-wife was Jezebel and their son was the Antichrist. His behavior became more erratic, sometimes refusing to speak to his family and even covering his mouth with duct tape. In a shocking incident, Thomas was accused of stabbing his brother during a fight. Although he was not indicted, his brother was committed for psychiatric treatment. Thomas also struggled to keep up with his bills and visitation with his son, which led Laura to limit his access to their children. His situation worsened when he began abusing cold medication and attempted to cross over into heaven by stabbing himself in the chest. Despite seeking medical attention at a hospital, Thomas left before being committed to psychiatric care. His mental state continued to spiral, and he struggled with alcohol addiction and mental health issues. In the spring of 2004, he turned to corisidine, cold medication for recreational use, which only made his situation worsen. Thomas eventually sought help at a medical health clinic, but he did not show up at the emergency room as advised by the staff. 3 weeks later, he stabbed himself in the chest again and went to the emergency room. The hospital personnel began making arrangements for his psychiatric commitment, but Thomas walked out of the hospital before it was finalized. The physician warned the police that he might be dangerous, but they were unable to locate him. On March 27, 2004, 2 days after coming into the emergency room, Thomas went to Boren's third-floor apartment and kicked the door open. Boren's boyfriend was at work, but Boren was home with her 2 children. Thomas fatally stabbed her, cut open her chest and pulled out a portion of her lung, thinking he was actually removing her heart. He went to the bedroom shared by their 4-year-old son and Boren's 13-month-old daughter, fatally stabbed both children and cut their hearts out of their chests. After he killed the children, he stabbed himself 3 times in the chest. Expecting to die from his wounds, he went into the living room and lay next to Boren's body. When he realized he was not dying, he placed the victim's organs in his pockets and walked to his house. Once he returned home, he placed the organs in a bag and threw them in a trash. Thomas then turned himself in at the Sherman police department, telling officers that he thought God wanted him to kill the victims. He killed each victim with a separate knife because he thought there were demons inside the victims. If the victim's blood was allowed to mix, he thought the demons might survive. He was taken to hospital and underwent chest surgery. This is a tragic reminder of the importance of mental health care and support. It is crucial to seek help when struggling with mental health issues and prioritize self-care. From there on, what Thomas faced could only be termed as hell on earth. The story of Thomas is a shocking and unsettling tale of murder, self-harm, and injustice that will leave you questioning the fairness of the criminal justice system. Just 5 days after committing the horrific murders, he gouged out his right eye with his own hands while waiting in jail for trial. The reason behind this gruesome act apparently was as a result of reading the Bible. In the book of Matthew 5:29, which says, "If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out." He also quoted Mark 9:47, which says that it's better to enter the kingdom of God with one eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell. Despite being diagnosed with schizophrenia, Thomas was deemed competent to stand trial after spending time in a mental hospital. However, the road to justice was not a fair one for Thomas. The trial, which began in February 2005, only focused on the death of one victim, Laura Boren, who was a white female while Thomas was black. The all-white jury was filled with individuals who were opposed to interracial relationships and marriage, with one juror even stating out that it goes against what God intended. Throughout the trial, Thomas' mental state was a central issue, with his behavior in the courtroom being catatonic at times. His attorney put forward an insanity defense, but the state argued that his mental illness was caused or worsened by drug use, which invalidated the insanity defense. Prosecutors even argued that his self-harm was an impulsive act rather than a sign of insanity. Despite these obstacles, Thomas was ultimately convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. The story only gets more bizarre and disturbing as he continues to struggle with his mental illness while incarcerated. He claimed to hear voices and see demons playing music from the band Queen. In July 2008, he attempted suicide by cutting his neck with a sharp object, which required 8 stitches. After the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals upheld his conviction in October 2008, Thomas shocked the world by removing his left eye and eating it. He claimed that he did it to prevent the US federal government from reading his thoughts. Finally, he was transferred to a unit which houses Texas prisoners with mental health problems, and received the psychiatric care that his trial attorney had been requesting. In early 2020, his case was brought before the United States Court of Appeals. It was argued that Thomas' original legal representation was ineffective, as his trial attorneys failed to object to the selection of 3 jurors who had a bias against interracial marriages. The prosecutors argued that Thomas was not insane, despite evidence supporting his mental illness. In April 2021, the Fifth Circuit upheld the trial's court verdict, and on October 11, 2022, Thomas' petition was denied by the Supreme Court. On November 11, 2022, a month later, Thomas was scheduled for execution on April 5, 2023. However, State District Judge Jim Fallon delayed the execution date, giving Thomas's lawyer until July 5th to prepare a request for a competency hearing. The story of Thomas is a harrowing example of the flaws in the criminal justice system and the struggles that individuals with mental illness face when navigating it. It is a story that will stay with you long after you finish watching this video. And speaking about watching a video, if you enjoyed it, please give us a like.